Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down Superman. Superman's one of those films that changed cinema, and I think its influence is undeniable. Though we had the George Reeves betrayal and Adam West Batman, this took comic adaptations to the next step. Going back to it, it's easy to see why too. Christopher Reeve embodies the Man of Steel, and he's the absolute definition of perfect casting. Every single actor that followed him in the role lives in his shadow, and he forever set the tone of what people thought of as Superman. This movie was a massive part of my childhood, and my mum was even talking to me the other day about how if I ever heard a bang in the house, I'd run into the living room, curl on my fringe, and red carpet around my neck. I thought I was Superman. I was 24 at the time, to be fair, but the character meant a lot. Even after 45 years, DC are still trying to live up to Richard Donner's classic, and no matter what gets put out, it's always compared to this. The score, cast, costumes, and tone, every film feels like it's measuring up to this one. Throughout this video, we're going to be breaking down why it's such a classic and going through the movie scene by scene. So come with us as we go up and away and bring you our in-depth breakdown of Superman. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? It's Spoiler-Man! What a loser!
I've got you.
You've got me! Who's got you?
So Superman and its sequel was conceived by Ilya Salkind, who pitched the idea to his father Alexander. He and his dad had some ideas for the character and were looking to lock down a deal. Warner Brothers were nervous though. They said that they'd give the rights to the character, but the pair had to pay for the film themselves. They didn't really have the confidence they'd actually make the movie, but said if they pulled it off, they'd agree to distribute it. These days though, it seems insane they'd not be as involved in a Superman movie, but you have to remember how things were at the time. Superman and the Mole Men and the Adam West Batman movie, they were the first dip into the genre, but they weren't massive productions. This was the first time a movie studio took a big gamble like this, and it was expected to be the most expensive film ever made. Coming in at $55 million, that's about $270 million in today's money. So the studio just saw it as too big of a risk. The Now Playing podcast brought up though how these days it seems insane they'd have doubts over Superman, but hey, back in 2008, an Iron Man movie seemed like a massive risk too. Now he's of course a big A-list character, but I think the similarities are just. Getting the rights for free was of course a big step towards making it, but this of course came with a long list of stipulations. There was a clause to keep the integrity of the character and make it so he was seen as a beacon of hope. If you look at cinema at the time, the 70s were a big shift culturally. Taxi Driver, Rocky, the Godfather movies, they were all gritty films that captured the mood perfectly. Superman was going to come in and bring this big hopeful tone, and there was definitely a shift at the time. Star Wars was being developed at the same time as well, and people were looking for something to lift them up. However, who was working around then? You still had the big names of the 70s. They brought in Mario Puzo to write the script, and you might recognize his name from The Godfather. Yes, they got the writer of The Godfather to do Superman. Paid $600,000, he actually helped to add a lot of prestige to the film. Now the Salkinds had also just made The Three Musketeers 3 and 4. They filmed both movies back to back, and it just streamlined the production. So they wanted to film Superman and Part 2 back to back, and had Puzo craft the drafts. Handing in a 552-page screenplay, Puzo went against expectations. He made the script incredibly camp and did this to draw in the Batman 66 crowd. Superman reportedly flew doing constant loop-de-loops, and the film was basically a slapstick comedy. They even dropped in a cameo from Kojak.
Who loves you, baby? You're beautiful.
Due to the length, the movie also needed a back credit card to pay for it. However, it was enough to pitch it to people. Due to Puzo's connection to The Godfather, they managed to lock down Marlon Brando early on. Signing on for $3.7 million, he also got 11% of the film's gross. In the end, after Brando felt cheated by the Salkinds, he also ended up suing them. This led to him getting $50 million overall, which ended up being pretty much the entire film's budget. And the guy just worked 12 days as well. However, his name added legitimacy to the project, and after that, everyone was interested. This included a ton of directors, but they all wanted too much money. However, Steven Spielberg was really close to signing on, and he was actually the first choice. At the time though, he was completely unproven. The quote is, Let's see how his little fish movie does, and we all know how that turned out. I do think what we end up getting though is pretty much what he would have made, even down to the John Williams score, who of course became a long-time collaborator with him. In the end though, they locked in Richard Donner, who just released the smash hit The Omen. However, he wasn't too hot on the script, and thus he ended up bringing in his own writers. Those were David Newman and also Robert Benton. A lot of the focus was then put on Lois Lane's dialogue, as they knew she was a key part of the movie. They also built up Lex Luthor and had him chewing Kleenex as a nervous habit. He was a self-flagellating chump, and in the end sort of written as a bit of a buffoon. We obviously know though that didn't make it to the movie. However, amongst the script, they knew they had some gold. Cutting out what didn't work, they eventually crafted a unique version of Lex. Though slightly different to the comics, it's hard to deny that his portrayal was extremely entertaining. Because of this though, Gene Hackman was cautious about signing on, as he was a bit concerned it would affect his reputation as a serious actor. As of writing the script, unfortunately, the actor's just passed away, and currently we don't have all the details. What I will say though is that he was an incredible actor, and this is arguably his most famous role. Like, it was so sad because we finished the Batman and Robin video, and at the end of it we put out an announcement saying, you know, we're going to be doing Superman soon, and then on the same day Gene Hackman died, and it was kind of like, oh, just didn't know how to handle it. So there is definitely a tragic side to watching back this movie, but it's hard to deny how much of an impact that he made. As important as Reeve is to the movie, it's difficult to imagine the 70s version of Lex being any other way. Guy just nails it and helped to make this movie a big success. However, there were issues on set. After completing about 3/4 of filming on the second, the director and producers had a big falling out. The Salkins and Pierre Spengler had a stranglehold on Donner and were constantly moving the goalposts. They never gave Donner a strict budget or a schedule, but would constantly say he was over them. Donner wasn't too hot on them in the end, and when talking about Spengler, he's quoted as saying, "At one time, if I'd seen him, I would have killed him." So Donner was fired, but the first film was finished up. However, it left a lot of things in the air for part 2. So he got fired from the studio with a movie distributed by Warner Brothers, and worst thing is, they replaced him with Richard Lester. We'll talk about that next time though, but because of this, several things were altered, including the ending. Originally they were going to have Supes throw the missiles into space, and then they'd explode and open up the Phantom Zone. Zod would then scream, "I'm free!" before the screen then cut to black. We then get the text, "Come back for Superman 2, and a big tease for next time. Now because of this, Zod was actually really important to get right. They went to Christopher Lee first, but I think Terrence Stamp nails it. Puzo also created Non, Ursa, Otis and Eve Teschmacher, which yeah, you can kind of see the camp tone there, especially with those latter two. When it came to Superman though, they approached several actors who were big names at the time. Robert Redford, Clint Eastwood and James Caan all turned down the role, despite Caan already being connected to Puzo and Brando. Caan notoriously said, "I'm not wearing that fucking outfit," which nice reply. Lots of people were interested though. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger was begging to be Superman, but for better or worse, he'd get to be a comic book character in 1997's Batman and Robin, which we recently broke down on the channel. Kill me! Burt Reynolds was also really close too, and it's the second time he lost his part in a Brando movie after missing out on Sonny and The Godfather. For me personally though, it's hard to imagine anyone other than Christopher Reeve playing the role of Superman. Like I said, he crafted the template for The Last Son of Krypton, and I don't think any other actors played him as well as he has. And I think there's been some others that have done an excellent job. It's just Reeve, yeah, there's something extra there, like he was born to play the role. Initially the studio put pressure on them to cast a big name, but after they got Brando and Hackman, they were just like, get whoever you want, we've got enough stars in the movie now. So they went for an unknown, and Reeve was currently working on Broadway. This was alongside Jeff Daniels and William Hurt, with the trio being seen as serious actors. Hurt thought he was selling out by being in a comic book movie though, only for him to of course be cast as General Ross in the MCU. So it is funny thinking how, you know, times have changed and now comic book movies are like the big thing in the industry. Reeve was given a costume though, and they blackened his hair with shoe polish for the screen tests. Old footage can be seen where he's acting opposite various prospective Lois Lanes, and watching it you can see the guy's clearly nervous. Like he's sweating, but it's very sweet. You may also notice that he's much skinnier in the footage. Before and even during the movie, Reeve trained with David Prowse, aka Darth Vader. Prowse was a former weightlifter and bodybuilder, and he got Reeves from 170 pounds up to 212. Reeve actually looks so different that all of the publicity shots had to be retaken. Though his off-Broadway castmates thought it was beneath him, he clearly took it seriously. There's actually also a very funny bit of trivia with his dad. Franklin Reeve apparently was over the moon he landed the role, but weeks later he found out he was starring in Superman and not the play Man and Superman. Either way, everything was in place and they began filming at Pinewood. Initially they wanted to shoot in Rome, but Brando was wanted for breaking obscenity laws. Still though, I think Pinewood works really well, and it was where they built the set for Krypton. Typically in the comics, it had just been a futuristic city, but they reimagined it as a crystalline structure, which is now pretty much how it's known. Over 350 staff were employed, with life-sized set and model counterparts being made. This was overseen by set designer John Barry, who also oversaw the sets on the Star Wars films. As for the Daily Planet scenes, they were filmed in
New York City.
They used the New York Daily News HQ as a stand-in for the Daily Planet, which gives it the feeling of a bustling newsroom. As for Kansas, you can't shoot Kansas on film because then it looks like New York.
Sir, why don't you just use real cows?
Cows don't look like cows on film. You gotta use horses.
What do you do if you want something that looks like a horse?
Usually we just tape a bunch of cats together.
So they shot the Kansas scenes in Alberta, Canada. What I love about the movie though is that you have these constant changes in location that really alter the look and feel. Firstly there's the Krypton sets, then the open fields and farms, and then we end with a spiraling city, which all works great to break the film up into chapters. Now this video is sponsored by DC Dark Legion. DC Dark Legion is a new official DC game that's out on iOS and Google Play for mobile and PC. This incredible game has a whole host of champions ranging through several DC heroes and villains. This includes Batman, who's voiced by Roger Craig Smith. If you've ever played Batman Arkham Origins, you'll know he was fantastic as the character there, and he once again lends his voice to the legendary Dark Knight. On top of that, he also plays his twisted opposite, the Batman who laughs. The game also has the Joker, Flash, Harley Quinn, Green Lantern, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and over 50 playable characters. Together, you must save Gotham from the Dark Multiverse. The game adapts the seminal Dark Knight's Metal series, which is one of my favourite by Scott Snyder. With its high quality comic book art style graphics, you can explore the shadows of Arkham all the way up to the towering heights of Metropolis and then go down into the depths of Atlantis. It's all here. On top of that, the game's free to play. Almost all champions released at launch can be unlocked for free. Within 1 month of play, you can collect over 350 bleed draws to unlock almost all champions. DC Dark Legion's a superhero strategy game with unique features. Enjoy portrait mode with clear, intuitive UI. You can also earn rewards even while idle. This means that when you're not playing, you're still building things up. The game also has RPG elements that allow you to customize your Batcave and collect and train a wide range of champions. You can also fight alongside and play with other DC fans from around the world in PvP matchups. Use my code in the description, DCDL999, to get lots of free resources. This includes 3 hero pulls called World Anvil Fragments, along with $199,999,000, $9,999 chip, and all these extra bonuses that you can see on screen right now. Just download the game by clicking my link in the description and go and save the DC multiverse now. Just click my link for either iOS, Google Play or PC and you can go and play DC Dark Legion free now. Thank you. Now as for the movie, we're going to be breaking down the extended TV cut. There's actually lots of different versions, but that's the one that has the most in it. On top of this though, there's of course the theatrical and then an extended cut with an extra 7 minutes. We then have the TV cut that was split and released over 2 nights, with each taking up about the space of 2 hours. Back then, advertisers would often have a rate based off the length of the film, so networks could just milk them for as much money as they could by stuffing everything in. Because of this though, you'll often see TV versions of films from the decade that have way more footage than the theatrical versions. But yeah, that's why we might mention something that you've never seen before, and where we begin is a moment that people often forget about.
In the decade of the 1930s, even the great city of Metropolis was not spared the ravages of the worldwide depression.
Now we open with a reading of the first appearance of Superman in 1938's Action Comics 1. However, you might notice that the comic cover is different to the real thing. There we had the infamous image of Superman lifting a car above his head and then smashing it like the like button. However, here we have a rocket blasting from Krypton, which helps to set up the film's first chapter. Now, Action Comics 1 started off the superhero genre with it ushering in pretty much everything we have today. Before that, comics were mainly about cowboys, pirates, and monsters. This helped humanity to think of themselves as something more though, which is something that Superman of course embodies. In 2024, Action Comics actually became the most expensive comic book of all time, with an 8.5 graded issue selling for $6 million. Arguably, it's also the most iconic comic book ever. I think it's rivaled only by Amazing Fantasy 15, which debuted Spider-Man. Now, when I've watched the movie in the past, I always wondered why it started with this scene. After all, it's something I pretty much always forget about until I'm back watching the movie. However, I think having a child reading this helps the audience to tap into the nostalgia when they first picked up a comic. It also reminds us exactly what kind of hero this is and how it's going to be a comic book brought to life. I don't think it's a coincidence that we then transition from a drawing of the Daily Planet into looking at the real one. It just adds authenticity. However, it also helps to play into the idea that this movie will have fantastical elements. As we mentioned earlier, the 70s were a time in movies where realism was pushed to the forefront. So having it do this just gives us that sense of wonder and almost like a childlike view of the world. It said that Donna had signs printed up and sent to every department that had the word verisimilitude printed on them. Donna explained it's a word that refers to something being real but not realistic. It was supposed to act as a constant reminder that they should treat these things as if they're real, but add in these elevated elements. Now, this entire scene was actually filmed backwards, which you can kind of see when you look for it. The moment started off with the Daily Planet, and then the child folded the pages up to the cover. As someone who's had to hold up books and read them on camera, yeah, I can totally understand why they did that. From here though, we then cut to the unforgettable titles, which were designed by Richard Greenberg. He also worked on the legendary titles for The Matrix. Groundbreaking at the time, these have influenced so many films. Now, in order to achieve this incredible effect, they used an Oxbury animation stand with an Elecon motion control system. This was coupled with a slit scan, which was used in 2001: A Space Odyssey to create the trippy effects we get at the end. We can also hear John Williams' score playing over the top. Jerry Goldsmith, who actually also scored The Omen, he was originally going to work on it, but fortunately he dropped out of the movie. Nowadays, this music's become somewhat the de facto theme for Superman, and it was used in Justice League and is also going to be used in James Gunn's Superman. John Williams used the London Symphony Orchestra, who also worked with him on Star Wars. It was a match made in heaven, and we then fly over and past Krypton's red sun, which is known as Ra. Though I couldn't find anything to verify this, I'm guessing it's based off the Egyptian sun god Ra. As we learn, the red star's starting to destabilize and it ends up exploding, which destroys the planet. Journeying to Krypton, we then see the crystalline structures, which of course match the Fortress of Solitude later on. I like how these techno-organic-like buildings could have been terraformed by the Kryptonians, and they also of course alter our Earth later on. The design's incredible, but Donna was actually pretty outspoken about how Barry didn't receive any recognition from the Academy for his work. The film's suite did, and that was just duplicating an already existing hotel. However, he noted this created an entire fictional planet, and to think it didn't receive any nods kinda shows how out of touch the Oscars have always been. Like The Good, the Bad and the Ugly didn't receive any Oscar nominations. Not even Best Score. One of the best films ever made. What are you doing? Emilia Perez, 13 nominations. Don't get me started. Whew, anyway, the Kryptonians in the comics, they were said to originally have super speed and strength. This was shown in the comics that released in 1939. However, this was later retconned, with Superman's powers being explained due to a difference in Earth's gravity. In the 1960s, further explanations listed Earth's yellow sun as the reason why Superman was so invulnerable. Krypton's sun was older and dying, and thus less energy was sent to the planet, which might explain why it's so icy as well. Now, the Fortress of Solitude itself, that first appeared in Action Comics 241. However, there it was a fortress mountain outside Metropolis. The Arctic Fortress would debut in Superman 187, and that released in 1966. Since then, that's become the standard, with its entrance only being accessible through lifting up a giant key. Said to be the most densest thing on Earth, the only person with the power to lift it's Superman. Anyway, at this point, we fly in over the dome, which was made using models. However, I think it still looks really good. There's just something about using practical things that still holds up, and yeah, I prefer this kind of stuff over CGI. Now it's here we meet Marlon Brando's Jor-El. Probably the smartest mind on the planet, he acts as not only a scientist, but also a lawyer. In the extended versions, they even bring up how he discovered the Phantom Zone, and he's now putting forth the case that Zod and the gang should be sent there. Turn them into an album cover! Now for this, multiple different styles were tested, including a membrane-like effect before they settled on this. Both look really creepy though, and yeah, you could have went with either one and it would have just remained rent-free in my head. Now in the comics, Zod was actually sent to the Phantom Zone during the pages of Adventure Comics 283. This was for creating an army of Bizarros which he'd use to try and take over the Kryptonian Council. So it kind of plays into the idea that he was trying to prop himself up as the Supreme Ruler. As mentioned earlier though, both Ursa and Non were original creations for the movie. Ursa did however appear in Action Comics 845. Now though people think Feora is based on her, she actually appeared in Action Comics 471. That came out during the production of this movie, so it's possible the parts were kind of playing on the zeitgeist. However, again, she may have been based on Feora. Feora also despised all men, and Jor-El mentions how Ursa has a hatred of mankind.
Whose perversions and unreasoning hatred of all mankind have threatened even the children of the planet Krypton.
Non would also not appear until Action Comics 845. There he was given the backstory of being a Krypton Science Council member who was captured and lobotomized. Though the backstory's not something that we get to see, it seems like Zod has indeed tried to take over Krypton. Krypton.
The planet Krypton.
Stan would ironically go on to voice Jor-El in Smallville, which was always a really nice Easter egg. Originally they also planned to have a fourth member called Kal-El. Like Jackal. IMDb trivia describes him as being a mischievous scamp, but they ended up removing him due to trying to get rid of the camp tone. The scamp tone. Now though they're seen as the villains, the Jor-El we meet here is also sort of in line with them too.
Join us. You have been known to disagree with the council before.
Due to his worries about the planet, he's also accused of being an insurrectionist. There's definitely the feeling that sending them to the Phantom Zone's like a second chance for them to live, whereas on Krypton, everybody's doomed. They still have a chance though. Now as for the Phantom Zone, it was slightly changed from how it was in the comics. There it made people like ghosts who couldn't be seen or interact with the real world. However, it was later changed to be an almost black hole-like prison where time and space were completely meaningless. This is then being expanded into lots of stories, with the one here being adapted into the origin of General Zod in Countdown 30. Their crimes are also briefly shown at the start of Superman 2, which sees the trio snapping a piece of crystal and then they get sent to the Phantom Zone. I love the way that we see the dome open up though and then get a solid beam shooting up into the sky. You've then got this spinny ring thing holding them in place and then a 2D, 3D pyramid thing that flies hauntingly towards them. All just looks brilliant, including the outfits that the council wear. The costume designers stitched thousands of little crystals to the suit which reflected light and gave this luminous look. It was a painstaking process, and if any oil from fingers got onto them, they had to be restitched. Brando also has a similar kill to the infamous Superman one that's very much the character's signature look. You also notice the legendary Superman symbol on his chest. This was actually Brando's idea, as he thought it would make a good connection to his son. This later was adapted to be the symbol of the House of El, which has become a big part of the comics. They also based this around the design of the George Reeves one and added it in as a little homage to that. However, not all of Brando's ideas were good. Before filming, he floated the idea of Jor-El being a giant floating green bagel. His rationale was that humans had no idea what Kryptonians look like. But Marlon, mate, we've seen what Superman looks like. Now, I did a lot of research into this because there were rumors he quit Apocalypse Now early to go and do this. However, from what I can gather, that isn't true. It has been thought though that the bagel thing could be ADR work that he'd provide at any point, and thus this may have been what he suggested as a workaround. However, I think that Apocalypse Now's rubbish, as they weren't really filming either part at the same time, and like I said, you know, he only filmed for 12 days. That was the case with Hackman as well, and they only had both actors for 2 weeks. So all their stuff shot for this and part 2 were done really early in production. Personally though, when it comes to the bagel, I think Brando just found it funny causing chaos. He was known for taking projects away from the directors, and famous for frequently pushing people's buttons. You hire Brando because he's a name, yeah, but you've got to be ready for what comes with it. Like, the guy didn't even read the script, and in every scene he was just reading off cue cards, which he did on Godfather as well. There's even a point where he's looking at the baby and actually just reading his lines off his nappy, or diaper if you're American, which is crazy thinking about it, like how unprofessional it is, but this is why his speech is a lot slower. He said, though, that taking the time to do his lines adds weight to the speech. It is as if the actor's thinking of the words as he says it, much like you would in real life. So I can get what he's saying, but the guy also says Krypton instead of Krypton, which I always found hilarious. Like, he clearly just doesn't care. However, you can't deny his performance is great, and I really like Brando's portrayal. Who didn't know was Christopher Reeve.
Marlon Brando.
Was it exciting to work with him?
Not really, no. The man didn't care, I'm sorry. He just, took the $2 million and ran.
We then see his Jor-El's threatened by the elders, with one being played by Trevor Howard, who was friends with Brando at the time. Told he'll be punished if he publicly states his theories, he's then forced to secretly send his son to Earth. It's here that we then meet Laura, who first appeared in the Superman newspaper comic strip. Versions of her have appeared throughout the comics, with a later one coming from Earth 2. Kal-El is also sent in a blanket that matches his feature colours. In Superboy 78, we learn that Superman made his suit using the clothes his mother sent him in, which is a great little detail. Now, sadly, the actor Lee Quigley, who played the baby, died at the age of 14, which was down to solvent abuse. It's somewhat part of the Superman curse, with Superman stars either dying, being badly injured, or falling off career-wise, which seemingly continues to this day. Jor-El then touches upon how he'll never be alone, and we learn that he's copied his consciousness. Not you though, Laura. He does a big speech about how his son will take all his characteristics, and this actually annoyed Susanna York, who played Laura in the movie. She was annoyed her character didn't have any input on their son, and is quoted as saying, "I don't give him dick." Feel a bit bad for young Kal-El here though, because it's like a 3-hour journey and he's got nothing to listen to other than his dad's audiobooks.
Which Einstein called his theory of relativity.
However, this entire thing's very biblical. There are of course shades of Moses with a child being sent down the Nile. Superman is also very much a Jesus allegory, and Jor-El even drops the line,
"The Son becomes the Father, and the Father the Son."
We then see his Krypton explodes as the area is filled with a red hue, which fits in with the red sun color. Sets were dismantled, people had a wild time, and stuntmen and explosions were filmed separately, while the backgrounds were matte paintings. Really add to the effect, and all this happens while the Kryptonian gods sent to investigate Jor-El. Going down in the extended cut, they felt this bit was needlessly adding to the runtime. Which, yeah, like I get it, because he's dead either way, so there's not much point sending in the guy from the day the Earth stood still when you order him from Wish. Tinfoil bish? Now, while Kal-El originally escaped in a traditional rocket, here it looks like a star. It does remind me in some ways of the Star of Bethlehem, which further plays into the themes. When you think of the manger, you also think of hay and farm animals, which plays nicely into the Kent's home. I love how as he flies on his journey, we also see the villains floating in space. This shot was not included in the theatrical cut, and it only appeared in the extended edition. The journey is brilliant though, and it really reminds me of 2001: A Space Odyssey, especially the Star Child scene. At the end, the sun rises over the planet just like 2001, and we begin with a new era dawning on Earth. Jeffrey Unsworth was actually the cinematographer on both that and this, so those similarities make sense. We then watch as Clark crashes down in 1948, which Lex works out later. Now, the scenes of Kansas were based on the paintings of Norman Rockwell. It definitely feels like the picturesque version of the location, and it sort of gives it this traditional feeling. Riding out on the road are Ma and Pa Kent, aka Jonathan and Martha.
Why did you say that name?
I think it's impossible not to feel for the pair, as they've been unable to have a kid. They'd be super parents, but Mother Nature's made it so things haven't worked out. However, a gift comes from God, and you could see them as being based on Mary and Joseph.
Then how I prayed and prayed the good Lord see fit to give us a child.
I just love that hug from the kid as well. It's like it's the first person he's seen in 3 years, and he crushes her to death. Now, but we also get some foreshadowing with Jonathan's heart.
You take things easy now, Jonathan. Remember what Doc Fry said about that heart of yours.
Glenn Ford and Phyllis Baxter do an incredible job, and instantly you want them as parents. I think a big part of Clark's story is how lucky he was to land here, and they've explored what would have happened if he hadn't in things like Red Sun and Flashpoint. I also love how the first thing Clark really does is lift up the Kent's truck. The cover of Action Comics had him lifting a car, so it's a nice little nod to that. In the comics, his first appearance also had him amazing them by lifting up an armchair, so they've sort of combined these two moments together. Anyway, we cut several years into the future and see life for Clark in high school. What I really love about this movie is that it chronicles a big part of the character's life. It makes it feel like an epic and one that spans decades and decades, especially in the 3-hour cut. Off the top of my head, I can't actually think of any other comic book movie where they go through a character's life like this. Batman Begins and Man of Steel, they have moments like this, but they're mainly told through flashbacks. It's nice to just have it laid out in chronological order, and to me, it feels more like a journey. Now it's here that we get to meet Lana Lang, played by Diane Sherry. Lang first appeared in Superboy 10 and was a love interest for the young Superboy. She was originally going to be played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, but the producers felt she was just too young. Lang's been a big part of the character's life though, and she of course returns for Superman 3. There she's played by Annette O'Toole, who'd later play Martha in Smallville. Speaking of Smallville, that's where we spend this next part of the movie. First appearing in More Fun Comics 101, it was then officially named in Superboy issue 2. Now poor Clark could be the biggest football star of all time, but he's forced to work as the kid who picks up the equipment. This sort of plays into his morality though, which has been discussed heavily in the comics. In Superman 146, Clark explains it would be unfair to use his powers. The team don't really respect him though, and he can't even go and listen to some records. Certainly beats drinking cans of Strongbow down the park like I used to do when I was a kid, but maybe he could use that super hearing to hear what they're up to. Either way though, the team have been known to play pranks on him in the comics, which is something we saw in Superboy 80. As for Clark here though, he's played by Jeff East. However, all his dialogue was dubbed over by Reeve. To be fair though, Reeve doesn't actually appear until 48 minutes into the film, and you probably want to have, some consistency or at least a tease of who the main actor in the movie is. However, East's voice can be heard in the TV version as the extra scenes weren't dubbed.
Lana, don't bother with these, huh? I'll take them in with the other equipment.
Now, according to IMDb trivia, it took at least 3 to 4 hours every day to make East look a bit more like Christopher. This included giving him a wig and a fake nose, which you can tell on most of the shots. The nose especially, it looks kinda grey, but I thought it was just standard makeup until learning it was an actual prosthetic. In his anger, Clark then launches a football which goes flying through the air. To achieve this, a cannon was put under the field, and the football itself was actually made out of wood. We then see more of his powers in action as he runs alongside a train. Faster than a locomotive! This is actually inspired by the comics, and it comes from the first page of his debut. However, this effect proved to be incredibly hard to create. Motion blur and frame cutting were tested, but they didn't get the desired effect. Instead, a wire was attached to the actor and he was just spun alongside it. The actor's feet never touched the ground, which is something I think you can kinda see. On the train, we also see a very young Lois Lane. Her mothers are played by Noelle Neal, who portrayed Lois Lane in the early Superman serials and also The Adventures of Superman. Lois's father was played by Kirk Allen, who played Superman in the 1948 serial. Sam Lane first appeared in Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane 13, but there he was introduced as being an army general. But we haven't got that kind of time here. In case you've not seen him before though, General Lane is basically the same as General Ross. Now this moment was actually cut from the theatrical release and was then added into the extended version. It works well though, and we see as Clark jumps in front of the train, but Jeff East was apparently almost hit by it. They managed to just pull him out of the way though, but apparently his hips were badly torn during most of these stunts. We then see Clark acting smug as the kids catch up to him. I love the way he's just standing there in that bright red, which of course plays into his cape. Clark is then told to not show off, and it's hinted he's had to hide his true powers. All the while, he's still leaning on the old truck which he first lifted as a boy. Tires still missing though. Clark being scolded for showing off though, that may have been an inspiration to create a totally different persona as Superman. Either way, this is some fantastic storytelling. We understand why he has to have a different identity, and we see why he has to use his powers for good.
And there's one thing I do know, son, and that is you are here for a reason. I don't know whose reason, whatever the reason is, maybe it's because I don't know. But I do know one thing. It's not to score touchdowns. Huh?
Thanks, Dad.
Tears in my eyes every time I watch that, mate, and we then see as Jonathan passes away.
Oh, no.
It's such an important lesson as it shows there's lots of things Superman simply can't change, even though he reverses time at the end. We'll talk about why that was actually banged in last minute, and I do think it kind of undervalues this moment. It is important for that to be his father's last lesson though, and it's such a devastating way to take the story. It's also very similar to his parents dying in Superman issue 1.
All those things I can do. All those powers. And I couldn't even save him.
That lament is also lifted directly from the comics. Not long after this, Clark then finds his old capsule from Krypton. It wakes him up and he hears an otherworldly sound. Due to what Jor-El later says, it was waiting for him to mature, and at this point he's basically hit 18. Due to how much older that Martha looks compared to the funeral, I'm also guessing that a number of years have passed. Now he finds the crystal for the Fortress of Solitude, and it helps Clark to build it from the ice. Saying his farewells, it's another scene about letting go and moving on. Clark saying goodbye to the football and farm life, and it's sort of his Jesus journey into the desert. Except this time it's the Icelands. We also hear that Ben Hubbard will help with the farm.
I talked to Ben Hubbard yesterday. And he said that he'd be happy to help out from now on.
He actually appears in Superman Returns, which is of course seen as a sequel to the Donnerverse. He was later added to the comics as well, and the character appeared in Action Comics 855. I love the pair hugging in the field though, and it's such an amazing shot that gives them their final farewell. Clark then heads out, and we even have a little Arctic animal swimming out there.
Bye, buddy. Hope you find your dad.
Hitting a vast plain, he then throws the crystal which creates the fortress. This was made through a combination of techniques which included matte paintings and real-life sets. Clark then turns on the computer and we get a hologram of Jor-El. It looks reminiscent of the wizard's face in The Wizard of Oz, and it creates such a haunting effect. Marlon Brando was actually shot using black velvet, which made Jor-El appear alone. Black velvet was also used for the later flying scenes with Lois and Superman. Oxford Scientific Films then produced the effects used when Jor-El teaches Clark. Algae was collected from Bermuda and then lit up from behind to get these trippy space effects. Clark's training is breezed right through though, as he simply appears in his costume right after this moment. The film tells us it's been 12 years and now he's ready to make his way into the world. So cool seeing Jor-El's face turn to crystal though, and then we go through his eye to see Clark's first flight. Everything just comes together really nice visually, and it's excellently edited and presented really well. Superman then journeys out to Metropolis, with New York being used to bring the city of tomorrow to life. This includes bringing in things like the Statue of Liberty, but yeah, I think even though you can tell it's New York, it works so well for the movie. I love seeing Clark's entry to the Daily Planet as a POV shot, and it really puts you in his shoes. It then switches to Jimmy Olsen's camera. Olsen's Superman's best friend, and he first appeared in Action Comics 6. He was then named in the Adventures of Superman radio serial, and also in the comics in Superman 13. He then had his own series, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, in 1954. He was also later used to introduce the New Gods and Darkseid, which is a story for another day. Here he's played by Mark McClure, who's one of the only handful of actors to appear in all 4 Reeve Superman films. He even played Jimmy in the 1984 Supergirl film, and later cameoed in both Justice League movies, like both versions as different characters. And we see Lois Lane is a pretty bad speller. It might be a reference to famous writers like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway, who were famously bad at spelling. Did you like the Lewis joke? Comment below. It also became a running gag over the years with Smallville and Lois and Clark. The Arrowverse also poked fun at her too, so it's nice to see that all kind of developed out from here. Now Lois Lane's shown as the top reporter, and clearly she's learned all she can from Perry White, especially as the pair finish each other's lines.
A good reporter doesn't get great stories, Jimmy.
A good reporter
makes them great.
Again, it's some amazingly snappy writing that sets the scene for the new dynamic. She's brash and on top, while Clark is meek and the opposite of what a manly man would be portrayed as. I love how we kind of have this perfect man playing an imperfect man, and it just works together to kind of showcase the alter identity. Now Reeves actually based his Clark Kent persona on Cary Grant's character in Bringing Up Baby. According to IMDb trivia, so Roger Moore actually saw Reeves' transformation firsthand. Pinewood was known for being the home of James Bond, with them even having a 007 soundstage. When making The Spy Who Loved Me, he said he saw Reeve in full Superman costume. Apparently he was being followed by women and everyone was paying attention. However, he said when he saw him as Clark Kent, that absolutely nobody paid attention to him. I think Reeve nails both aspects of the character, and he can appear completely different by just altering his posture. Instantly, we see Clark as an unassertive reporter, but a fast typer, which is a nice thing that kind of plays into his character. Also love the soda water scene, and Lois instantly realizes that this guy's he's a bit different. He completely misses the sexual innuendo of squeezing the bottle at his crotch, and he wants to send half his money to his mother. Perry then asks for a towel and a coffee, and Jimmy calls him Chief, and Perry says,
And make mine black and no sugar. Right, Chief. And don't call me Sugar.
This is a reference to Jimmy Olsen A, where Perry would start by saying, "Don't call me Chief." This establishes the rest of the tone of the movie though, and finally they start adding in some comedy. Now we've kind of touched upon, what films were like in the 70s, but there was definitely the feeling that crime was everywhere. Lois at one point even touches upon how she's interviewing the president later. They kind of talk about corruption, and Watergate was a massive thing at the time. There was also a big financial crisis, and low-level crime was on the rise. This is shown with a mugger, who we then see attacking Lois and Clark, and he's the best dressed mugger I've ever seen. We even see a man steal some fruit juice before this though, and it helps to foreshadow the mugging. We need a hero. This scene would also later be referenced in Wonder Woman when a similar mugging happens. There we watch it going down in an alleyway, and just like this scene, it's stopped by the hero. Lois is off to get answers from the president as Air Force One's landing. We then see the Daily Planet chopper ready to pick her up, which plays into the big publication that it was. This then gets referenced later in Batman v Superman, but they don't really have the money to constantly use the chopper. Newspapers, they're not selling like they used to. The comic Daily Planet's got its own flying newsroom though, and this first appeared in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen 1. Also, really like the Art Deco waiting room sign. The Art Deco style, for me, is the best look for Superman, and it just adds to the 30s aesthetic. Now as the chopper comes into land, the voice on the radio is actually that of Christopher Reeve.
Daily Planet Copter 1, this is ground.
Everything then kicks off, and it's a great way to show Supes to the world. Though it goes by in just a couple of minutes, this scene actually took 6 months and 5 film crews to film. Originally Superman was just going to save a falling Lois Lane, but they added in the helicopter to give it extra oomph. Also, love how Superman goes to a phone booth to change. This first occurred in The Mechanical Monsters, which was a cartoon released in 1941. Since then, it became a comic staple, and is very much how you imagine the character changing. However, the booth's a modern one for the time, so he gets caught short. This leaves him with the revolving door as the only option, and he does the iconic shirt rip to reveal his suit. This mirrors him struggling with the door earlier, and it really shows who his true persona is.
That's a bad outfit!
I love how you can take that as being a bad outfit, as in good, but also bad because, yeah, if you saw this guy walking along the street, you'd find it a bit weird. Also, with his suit being on under his shirt and his clothes, I don't know where he stuffs the cape, are his pants baggy? We'll never find out. However, everything here just helps to play into the camp nature of the film, and that line especially, it tells you to just have fun with it. We then see Superman flying again, which still looks good today. However, they had to spend $2 million to make it work, but it was worth every penny. Now, it turned out that Reeve actually did hang gliding, so he knew how to make it work. In a lot of the tests, people, would just hang their arms down by their sides and would barely hold their legs up. So they looked like a pig hanging from the ceiling. Christopher knew to stick his arms out in front of him though, and to have his legs soaring from the back. Wires were used for Superman to take off and land, and they were then painted away in post. They also mixed in a bit of blue screen at certain points. However, this meant the suit had to be a bit lighter and then lit to make it look darker. The yellow also got kinda lost as well. On the 4K Blu-ray, they make a big thing about how it was all finally color corrected so that nothing was washed out due to the compositing. And it still looks great. The cape was also fitted with umbrella-like rods which had remote controls to make it look like it was soaring through the wind. Now, as mentioned earlier, the helicopter wasn't originally going to fall in the movie, but Richard Donner decided to drop it during production. It was therefore a double jeopardy scene, much like the film's climax.
Statistically speaking, of course, it's still the safest way to travel.
Statistically speaking, it's still the safest way to travel.
We then get a montage of Superman stopping various crimes around the city. We see him stop a cat burglar, and this involves a clever visual effect. At one point, we see a guy in an office with those on the outside moving vertically. In reality, the guy in the office was strapped into his chair, and the room was tilted sideways. We then get a scene with some armed robbers who escape in a boat. One tries to knock out Superman with a crowbar, but he says,
"Bad vibrations?"
which might be a reference to the song Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys. We then get a funny moment with the boat note sent to the precinct, and the police are in awe. We then see as Superman goes to save a cat from a tree. I think this moment's really important to show, as it highlights he doesn't just focus on the big stuff. Even taking time out his night to help with the small things helps to highlight that everybody matters. However, her mother doesn't believe her and gets smacked by her, which today you'd probably have some parent councils complaining about the film. Air Force One sends stuck in bad weather on the way to Metropolis. Though we touched upon Nixon before, you can work out the current president's Jimmy Carter. The president was actually famous for peanuts, as he worked on his family's peanut farm and they were used as part of his presidential campaign. Which might be why the crew mention he's got a mouthful of peanuts, and though they don't say Carter, you know, you can kind of draw the connections there. Either way, saving planes has been a staple of the character as far back as Superman 8. After a night on the town and saving everyone's life, we then see as Superman goes back to his father. He's revealed himself to the world, which his dad accepts. Jor-El then says humans abuse resources and he must keep his identity secret so the villains can't attack his loved ones. Nowadays, we just take that as a given, and that's the reason why you have to hide who you are. Back then though, this was the first time really doing this thing, so you had to spell it out why he had to do this. His training is now complete though, but he's about to meet his first real nemesis. I love how we see Luthor swimming, sunbathing, and also wearing beachwear. It references his obsession with creating his own beachfront property, even though at the moment they're underground. Like that beach view that you see is revealed just to be a projection, it's a nice little touch. We also see a bust of Julius Caesar in Luthor's bedroom. He's one of the great figures of history, and the Emperor was also in the Comic Hall of Heroes. Now Lex is angry that he isn't the one who got superpowers, and we see as Otis takes Miss Tessmacher's photo. This mirrors our boy Jimmy taking Lois Lane's photo twice in the movie and shows some nice similarities. Lex is then given his dressing gown, which has an L on it resembling Luthor's trademark logo. We then see Perry putting down some newspapers, and I love how you can see the line around Soups where he's clearly just been cut out and stuck on. Simpler times. We've got other papers from the comics as well, such as the Metropolis Post and also the Metropolis Times. Perry is furious though that he's not getting the scoop, and I did wonder if these scenes inspired J. Jonah Jameson in 2002's Spider-Man. Superman then goes to meet Lois, and his suit really pops here on the balcony. It's such a fantastic scene, and Kidder and Reeve do an incredible job of showing off their chemistry. I don't think it's any coincidence that this was the scene that they used to audition the actors with. Now the original script was going to be more overtly romantic, but I think the subtle charm works here. His playful smile when he says she'd be the first to know he's married, it's just a nice way to touch upon things. He also says he's 220 to 225 pounds, with Reeve being 220 when filming. She's lost in his eyes though, and bashfully asks about his bodily functions. I can't get the scene from Mallrats out my head.
The only way he could bang regular chicks is with a kryptonite condom. That would kill him.
Now Soups then reveals he's from the planet Krypton. I'll forgive her for not knowing how to spell that, because Marlon Brando didn't know how to say it, and he's the most expensive actor ever at this point. He mentions that he's here to defend truth, justice, and the American way, which is a phrase that's become synonymous with the character. DC, in their infinite wisdom, they have kind of downplayed it recently due to politics, but at the time this was what the character was known for. Now this was actually first used in a radio serial, and it was to hammer home what Americans were fighting for when they were going out for World War II. You also then get a flirty moment where Lois asks if he can see what colour her underwear are. Unable to see them initially, it shows the character can't see through lead. X-rays are unable to pass through this in real life, so it's nice that they kind of tied into the science. The pair then go on a flight together, which takes us to some spoken word poetry.
Can you read my mind?
The Now Playing podcast, they actually brought up how Donna hated this entire scene, but they needed something to add into the flight. Otherwise, it would have just been them gliding through the air for 5 minutes, but I actually think that probably would have worked better. Now initially, they actually wanted Kidder to sing the lines, but then they heard her singing voice. So they just went with the poetry. Honestly though, I think saying it would have worked better, but the fact that it's rhyming, it kind of takes you out the moment.
Here I am, like a kid out of school, holding hands with a god. I'm a fool.
Like, I don't know why she's thinking in rhyme.
But I'm not a rapper.
Now, just before taking off, Lois also mentions that he's just like Peter Pan.
Clark said that you're just a figment of somebody's imagination. Like Peter Pan.
Now, if he's Peter Pan, then she's definitely Wendy Darling, and she is wearing a similar dress to how it's portrayed in the cartoon. The flight that we see is even very similar to the 1953 movie, including them moving among the clouds. Clark then comes in trying to find out how his date affected her. She's absolutely blown away by Soups and not even able to focus on what he's saying. Again though, Reeve effortlessly nails the performance, and even just taking off his glasses alters his entire look. Cutting back to the tunnel, we then see that the Knights made the front page. Lex finally shows off some of his comic superintelligence, and he works out where Krypton actually is. Lex surmises that the radioactivity in kryptonite will weaken Superman and make it so he can take down the hero. He then comes across an article of people finding meteorites in Ethiopia. Like a dumbass, Superman also revealed he can't see through lead, and now he's got the two parts of the plan that he needs. Now from here, we then cut to the group trying to steal a nuclear warhead. Lex has got red hair, and this matches his comic look in the early incarnations. He's also come up with the idea to use a remote control car, which would give Tesla a run for its money. I did crack up though when the sergeant insists on doing the resuscitation, which if you want to do that, go for it. Now the plan kind of falls apart because in Luthor's vast intelligence, he decides to send Otis in. He messes with the warhead, doesn't get the coordinates right, and thus things don't go too well with this part of the plan. The TV cut actually explains the plan a bit more because on the surface, it doesn't really make that much sense. After all, Superman gets thrown into the water to drown, and the missiles get sent out anyway. However, the TV cut explains that Otis did actually mess up this first missile and punch in the wrong coordinates. Because of this won't point at the San Andreas fault, so they then go to the second missile to screw with that instead. The way they edit it though, you would think it's the same missile being messed with twice. The original plan though was to have Superman drown and just fire one missile. Instead though, they programmed two, but yeah, I think it works either way. They just clear it up a bit more in the extended versions. Either way, it's a nice break from the tension and a fun way to spend some time with the villains. It would have been a pretty smart plan that would have actually have defeated Superman, but Otis is an idiot and I can't sanction his buffoonery. So he messes it up and they then go to the second nuke. The plan's then put into motion as they block the bridge using a mobile home. I love how we also have Otis with a black eye, and this is after Lex has just beat him up in the back of the ambulance. With both plans being similar as well, Lex mistakenly calls the lieutenant a sergeant. All this happens as we see Miss Tessmacher go in and change up the coordinates of the nuke. We then cut to the Hoover Dam with Jimmy Olsen taking photos of it. Lois is also shown in California setting up the final act. In the original script, Lois wasn't in much of the finale, and they actually had the world spinning backwards at the end of part 2. That's why if you watch the Donna cut, you're like, why are they doing the same ending twice? However, the producers were running out of money and obviously Donna got fired. So they thought that they might not even get the chance to do a sequel. Thus, they moved the time travel thing up to the end of this one and added in Lois's parts to make it so there was a reason Soups had to do it. Lois interviews a man who sold his land to a mysterious buyer, which in the end is revealed to be Lex. Now it's very similar to the plot of Chinatown. This was obviously a big film in the 70s, with it being nominated for 11 Oscars. It won 2 as well, including Best Screenplay. That was released in 1974, and land in California being brought up would have been a big talking point at the time. We also learn that the kryptonite's been stolen, and see as Lex then taunts Clark. Doug's stock going mental, and mine was as well watching this. I love how Perry asks Clark to be more assertive and aggressive, just as the villain asks him to face him. I did find his suit being put on while falling, it is a bit dodgy there, but it was the 70s. Simpler times. Just transform him into the costume as he's flying down me, yeah? Don't care about the logistics. Either way, we then see as Superman drills into the sewers, and this leads to him running the gauntlet. This scene was all cut out from the theatrical, and I remember it being a big thing that they used to sell the extended editions with. I've no idea why it was cut either, as it works pretty well thematically. You need to show Superman's invulnerable before you then show Lex destroying him. It just adds dynamics, and yeah, no idea why they cut it. The machine gun bullets hitting Superman's suit is always going to look great no matter what. Seeing him being completely unharmed by everything always works so well. Whether it's the turrets in Batman v Superman or the eye bullet scene in Superman Returns, this is one of the coolest things about Soups. He's also set on fire and then frozen, which really adds to the dynamics. Anyway, Superman arrives and confronts Mr. Luthor. Lex shows how smart he is though, as the whole thing was done as a ruse and a bluff. Despite it being a bluff though, this shows Superman's weakness. He will always do the right thing no matter what. His greatest trait's also his biggest weakness, and it's something that Lex weaponizes. Now as we learn, Lex Luthor Incorporated owns all the land that will survive the San Andreas fault. Lex Corp becomes synonymous with the comic character, however it didn't appear in the comics until 1986's Superman 416. When researching this video, it has been interesting seeing how much iconic Superman lore wasn't actually created until after this movie released. However, Lex's plan did somewhat come from the comics. Superman issue 4 introduced the villain, and there his master plan involved weaponizing earthquakes. Using an earthquake weaponizer machine. So it's true to the comics. Now we also learn that Otis has named a new place after himself.
Otisburg.
Though this doesn't get to be, there's actually a place in Gotham called Otisburg. It's shown up in comics and also the Arkham games, and it's always nice to see a little nod to this movie. The nukes are launched and the army try and fix it, but we see as they're unresponsive. If you look here, there's a young John Ratzenberger who you may recognize from Cheers.
Absolutely impossible, sir. They have the new P-20 low-level avoidance systems.
If that voice sounds familiar, it's also because he's been in every Pixar movie ever. We then cut to the president who's playing golf. It's a pastime of most modern US presidents, but Carter was one of the only ones who didn't play it regularly. So maybe it isn't Carter, but yeah, that peanut bit before, and just the stereotype of a president playing golf, you know, it does make sense. The threat of nuclear war loomed largely over the Cold War though, so this is really tapping into the zeitgeist. However, the 1970s actually saw a warming in relations between the US and USSR. It was a period of détente, and it even saw SALT getting signed even if it wasn't ratified. However, we did see the two superpowers limit their nuclear arms race. This would then unfortunately be thrown out the window when the USSR invaded Afghanistan. Movies like 1983's War Game, they would later highlight the fear of nuclear war around this period, and it would set up a major plot point in Superman 4. Superman then tries to stop Luthor but falls right into his plan. Luthor tricks him by pretending to hide a fake detonator in a lead box, but this is actually hiding kryptonite.
Mind over muscle.
Now there are a myriad of different colours of kryptonite, but green is the most synonymous. The green rock first appeared in the radio serials and made its comic debut in Superman 61. Now Luthor doesn't really care about where the missile is going, as it doesn't affect his plan. However, who it's going to affect is Miss Tessmacher.
Lex, my mother lives in Hackensack.
Like, such good delivery on that.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Because of this though, she ends up saving him. Calling back to the Daily Planet interview, she says she believes him as he always tells the truth. So him lying there actually saved the day. See, lies are good. He promises to save her mother first if she saves him though, and thus he races to the less devastating missile. The other one hits the fault and cracks the Hoover Dam, which causes the land to flood. In the middle of all this devastation, Lois also gets killed, which is a crazy thing to have in the final act of your movie. Now Superman then flies into the Earth's core and he attempts to correct the fault, or put the fault back to how it was. This evokes the classic image of the weight of the world on Atlas's shoulders though, which symbolizes the weight that Supes carries. It's something that's actually been hinted at in a number of comic book movies, with all the Batman Burtonverse films having a nod to it, which we've broken down on the channel. Either way, the destruction here is massive. We see the Hollywood sign falling down and even the Golden Gate Bridge falls apart. Shooting things from the perspective of those on the bridge is such a great touch, and yeah, anytime a school bus is in danger, it just makes things seem even more dangerous. This would then later be referenced in Man of Steel with Clark's school bus going over a bridge. The bridge looks great though, and they made highly detailed models for the movie, which shows how much effort they were putting in. The Hoover Dam as well, that also looks fantastic. This then forces Supes to save Jimmy, and the train scenes also pulled from Action Comics 5, which looks brilliant as well. Some of the models though, they do look a bit ropey, especially the flood scene. That was because model maker Derek Meddings left the film as he wasn't locked in for the duration. So we do have some ropey effects here and there. Now I mentioned before how the nukes were tapping into cultural fears, and this whole disaster sequence was very much playing upon the times. 70s moviegoers were crazy for disaster films, with 1974's Earthquake inspiring a lot of this scene. The 70s also saw movies like Roller Coaster, Towering Inferno, and Meteor hit cinemas. So it was very much part of the time. I love how Superman's also like, get the shot, kid, because, as they say,
A good reporter doesn't get great stories, Jimmy.
A good reporter
Makes them great.
We then see as Lois is stuck as the dam floods, but Superman blocks it with a giant boulder. This is right out of Superman issue 3. This issue also saw Superman race to save Lois from a car, so they've pulled these moments together. Reportedly, Mario Puzo heavily researched old comics for his script. Apparently, he could often be found in the DC Comics archives, poring over old comics. It explains why a lot of the movies lifted right from the early days of the Man of Steel, and I think it works so well as an homage to what the character's gone through. Now, like me, Donna was also outspoken about how bad the model was at 2 hours 48. It looks like something out of an early Doctor Who or Thunderbirds episode, and yeah, you can tell they were running out of time and money. Funnily enough, the land that was worthless has now become worth it, as water's now part of their environment. So Luthor's rich. Now, the people there will now have it, and it's a nice way to save them too. Sadly though, Lois is dead, and we see rage and grief from Superman. Christopher Reeve is fantastic in this moment, I think. It just builds out really well from his dad's death, and he flies out into the clouds. Also, love the narration, and even like the Mufasa Jor-El in the clouds. I think my big issue with the ending though is that the time travel doesn't really come with a cost. I've always liked the idea in time travel stuff that if you change things, it makes something worse happen. You mess with time, it tends to mess back, that sort of thing. That's what the original plan was as well, with this then freeing Zod, which left us with a cliffhanger. However, that's all cut, but I do think it would have worked better. Also, I looked into the science behind spinning the Earth backwards, and yeah, you might have guessed it, but it doesn't actually reverse time. All it would do is destroy the planet and kill everyone on Earth. Yay! Time is obviously separated from the rotation of the Earth, and thus the two things aren't linked. The Earth also rotates at 1,000 miles an hour, and if that stopped, we would still keep going. It would be like suddenly braking a car, so we'd all be flung into whatever was in front of us at 1,000 miles an hour. Whoa! As a kid though, you know, spinning the Earth backwards, reversing time, it makes sense for some reason. Also, don't know how the timing works on this, because if you reversed it, you know, the fault would still keep going, but you know, either way, it leads to Jimmy and Lois being saved. There also should be another version of Superman out there, but moving on. Now, we do get a little tease here that Lois works out Superman's identity. This happens just as our boy Jimmy takes photos of Lois, which is a full circle moment from when we first met them. Lex then plays piano and sings, with Hackman playing this for real. Otis and Lex are then sent to jail, with Lex finally showing his bald head. Superman then flies into space, and we get Reeve smiling at the camera. I still get goosebumps watching this moment, and it perfectly encapsulates Christopher Reeve. This is the way you portray Superman, and yeah, whenever I watch it, it always brings a little tear to my eye. Whether that's nostalgia, knowing what sadly happened to the actor after, or even just the feeling of how perfect the ending is, something always gets me. This shot would also be reused for Superman 2's ending, and it's something Donna has used before. Damien breaking the fourth wall and looking at the camera, that was how they ended The Omen, so Donna thought he'd bring it across to this too. It closes out what's a fantastic film though, and I hope you guys have enjoyed coming back to it. Superman 2 was released in 1981 with 2 more sequels and coming after that. That was Superman 3 in 1983 and Superman 4 in 1987. Sadly, the franchise, much like the later Batman movies, would be diminishing returns. While Nolan saved Batman on the big screen, Superman's unfortunately had a couple of non-starters. Superman Returns and the subsequent Snyderverse, they were all victims of the studio being disappointed in the results and then drastically trying to change direction. Even Superman 2 fell victim to that as well, with Richard Lester replacing Donner. He'd worked on the Three Musketeers 3 and 4 and agreed to do it due to the Salkins still owing him money from that. 2 was considered a triumph at the time though, but personally I think the Donner cut's vastly superior. Few have managed to live up to this though, and yeah, it's one of those timeless classics that will forever be talked about. It took the comic book movie genre to a new height, and just like how Supes changed comics, this changed cinema. Superman creators Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster were both over the moon with the movie, and even though they'd had their legal troubles with DC, they loved seeing Supes brought to the screen. And I hope you've enjoyed it too. Please drop a like on the video if you have, and also leave a comment with your thoughts below. Did you know that members of the channel also get early access to videos as well? If you click the join button, you'll get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else for just 99 cents a month. Less than $12 a year, but it all goes towards helping videos like this get made, helps us expand our horizons, and just do things that we think you guys are going to want to watch. Huge thank you to everyone who does that. It really means a lot to us. I can't believe how many of you have joined in, and it just takes the pressure off. If you want to get some merch as well, we've also got a heavy spoilers line located just below the video. There we've got our Duncan Idaho top from all you June heads, Alien Chestburster one, Disney shill, and a lot more. We've also got the Warner Brothers joke. We didn't do a proper Warner Brothers joke, but it's there as well. We drop new designs on there all the time too though, so definitely keep an eye out. Now if you want something else to watch, we've got a breakdown of one of the Batman movies on screen right now. With that out of the way though, huge thank you for sticking through the video. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.